capable of violence. Looking around the room of heavily tattooed, bearded, muscular men, the two partners began stacking the handouts they had received in front of them. The weapons on their bodies were enough to wage war, let alone what was attached to their load-bearing vests or what was in the trunk of their vehicles. Each man present possessed a unique skill set and even more unique experience, but all were manhunters. These were not new law enforcement officers. These were not men looking to simply collect a paycheck or to respond to basic calls for service. These were men seeking to prevent violent people from harming innocent human beings with no thought of their own safety. The men present in the room were the representatives from the teams that covered 8 different geographical regions. The meeting was actually a briefing for a large-scale gang operation plan for the near future in which all 8 teams would be brought to a single city. The briefing had covered an ongoing turf war that included several homicides in a short period of time between 2 rival gangs. The plan was to conduct warrant services, parole searches, and citywide saturation in an effort to suppress or curb the ongoing violence. As the meeting concluded, the men grabbed their gear-clad load-bearing vests on the ground, pulling them over their heads. Several handshake-led hugs were exchanged around the room. These men may have covered varying jurisdictions, but the community was nonetheless a very exclusive and tight-knit group. The two partners exited the unmarked cinder block building where the briefing had occurred, while both asking the most important question: "What's for lunch?" Smiles crept across their faces. For better or for worse, the prospect of conducting citywide gang saturation operations was just another day at the office. What was for lunch was a far more important question. The partners took their seats in the all-black unmarked police vehicle, their arms bumping the customized Colt manufacturing M4 carbine patrol tactical rifle locked in the vertical rack between their seats. They agreed on Chinese food as they pulled out of the parking lot. Retrieving their earpieces loosely hanging off the backs of their vests, both men placed them into their ear and turned the knob on their vest-mounted radios, activating them. Just as one partner asked if the other had seen the game that weekend, their earpieces came to life with a deep male voice. "Motor 1, failure to yield." A tone echoed through the earpieces as a calm, collected dispatcher voice responded. "Dispatch copies, failure to yield. Advise location." The male voice came back. "Motor 1, failure to yield. Southbound Washington Street, approaching Jefferson Road. Stand by for the plate." Following a brief pause, the male voice returned to the air, stating, "California license, Adam 123, Boy Charles David, on a silver Toyota Tundra." "Dispatch copies, Adam 123, Boy Charles David. That plate returns on a stolen 2015 Toyota Tundra, silver in color." The male voice responded, "Motor 1 copies. It'll be a pursuit." The dispatcher responded, "Copy, 1033 for Motor 1 in pursuit. Any available units in the area to respond?" The partners looked at each other, smirks creeping across their face. The pursuit was only a couple blocks away, heading in their direction. It looked like the Chinese food would have to wait. The partner driving immediately flipped the switch on the center console all the way to the right, activating the unmarked unit's lights and sirens. The partner in the passenger seat grabbed the handheld mic and keyed up. "Two-man unit, gang 301, en route, less than 1 out." Tires screeching, the police vehicle tore down the road as the two men began breathing deeply, calming their thumping hearts and focusing their racing thoughts. As they ran the third stop sign in a row, they could see the motor officer in pursuit in the distance, heading southbound towards them, the silver Tundra attempting to frantically get away. The partner paused at the next stop sign as the pursuit would travel down the road directly in front of them. Suddenly, approximately 100 yards north of their location, the Tundra peeled off onto a dirt road traveling parallel to a water overflow channel. The motorcycle officer came to a screeching halt as both gang officers began hysterically laughing. One of the partners stated, "No way he gets those shiny boots dirty. What do you think? The other partner began chuckling and responded, "Not a chance." Sure enough, the motor officer parked, stepped off his motorcycle, and continued to broadcast the suspect's direction of travel, but did not continue the pursuit. The partners fist bumped as the one driving inquired, "Game time?" With a fake expression of disbelief, the partner riding passenger nodded, "Game time." The unmarked unit tore into the dirt field to their northeast, both officers bouncing around their seats like ballpark bobbleheads. The driver of the Toyota Tundra noticed the unit ripping through the field in his direction and realized his escape was about to be cut off. The Tundra came to a screeching halt, dirt, dust, and rock kicking into the air in a massive cloud. The partner that was driving eased up on the gas pedal as both partners strained their eyes for any movement from the brown dust storm. Suddenly, a man burst forth from the cloud, running eastbound through the field. Like a street racer hitting the nitrous button on the steering wheel, adrenaline coursed through both men's veins as they realized not only was the man running, but he was running with an AR-style rifle with a large magazine inserted in the magazine well. There was no hesitation. There was no debate. The partner in the passenger seat immediately pressed the release button to the M4 locked in place between their seats. In one smooth motion, he activated the Aimpoint Pro optic on the top of the rifle, using the dashboard to create as stable a shooting platform as possible amidst the bouncing car. Gang 301 Foot Bill, running eastbound, rifle in hand, methodically came from the partner riding passenger as he tracked the fleeing man through his optic. The gang unit sped up ahead of the man, cutting off his escape. Without speaking, both partners exited the vehicle and sprinted towards the man. Seeing his avenue escape was cut off to the east, and knowing he could not return to the west, he turned northbound, running towards tall grass on the edge of the wash area full of standing marshy water. As he approached the tall grass, the man looked over his shoulder towards the gang unit. The officer riding passenger flipped the weapon safety to fire, breathing deep and slow to steady his heart rate and trigger finger. The man dove into the tall grass, vanishing from the sight of the officers. Once again, like a well-choreographed dance, the officers separated from each other, placing distance between the two of them, demanding the suspect pick one target should he choose to fire. The top of the man's head appeared on the other side of the grass, still running northbound, wading into the water. The officers continued to close the gap. As they reached the tall grass, the suspect vanished beneath the water. Pausing at the edge of the water, the officers searched in earnest for any signs of movement. Suddenly, the man stood up, facing the officers in the waist-deep water. The rifle was no longer in his hands, though the officers never saw him drop it. One rifle and one pistol pointed at the suspect's center mass, the officers simultaneously began yelling, "Hands, hands, hands!" To their dismay, the suspect tucked his hands behind his back, out of their sight, and began yelling, "Shoot me! Shoot me!" Time slowed to a crawl. Both officers' fingers moved from index to slowly removing the slack from the trigger on their weapons. Their brains were screaming threat as they breathed deep and slow, commanding their body and mind to calm down. Fast as lightning, the suspect whipped his hands out in front of him, taking a shooting platform. Both officers squeezed to within a millimeter of the trigger wall. There was no weapon in his hands. The partners immediately eased the pressure on the trigger, however, fingers remained inside the guard. One of the partners began yelling, "Hands up!" The deranged suspect continued to yell obscenities but kept his hands in view. A responding canine unit arrived and began making announcements as his dog barked a vicious reminder of what non-compliance could end with. Seeing the suspect's eyes widen at the prospects of the fur missile being deployed, the suspect began to comply with orders. The officers moved their trigger fingers back to an index position, breathing deeply with relief. The suspect slowly exited the water and was immediately handcuffed. A search of his person yielded 2 handgun magazines, but no pistol. The original motor officer radioed over the air. "I have a pistol on the ground by the truck driver's side door." The two partners' eyes met as they realized the pistol had likely fallen out of his waistband on his exit from the vehicle. The suspect's rifle was recovered, apparently jammed with tall grass lodged in the port and bolt carrier group. Both officers looked at each other and nodded. They knew how close it had been. There seems to be a confusion amongst many people in society today when it comes to men and violence. This perception typically has two avenues. Number one, civilized, educated, or even good men should not be or are not capable of violence. Number two, violent men are bad. The misunderstanding, or dare I say, outright lie, seems to dictate so much of how culture views men, particularly within the church. Dr. Jordan Peterson said, "A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control." In the modern church, it is not uncommon to find pastors and people advocating for a pacifist approach to life. They use Matthew 5 and Luke 6 out of context in an attempt to proclaim violence has no place in the Christian worldview. "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either." Luke 6:27-29. If the concept seems foreign or even confusing, let's do a brief case study. Example number 1. You enter a coffee shop to meet a friend for coffee, and within that shop you notice a man with his family. This husband and father is clearly in good physical shape and carries himself in a calm, collected manner commonly seen in martial arts practitioners or members of law enforcement. He gives you a confident nod and smile as their watchful eyes continue to scan the room. A deranged person enters the shop, either under the influence of a controlled substance or with a clear intention to commit a robbery. The husband or father noticed the person entering the building before you and had already moved to engage the person. Example number 2. You enter a coffee shop to meet a friend for coffee. You notice there are only teenagers consumed with the latest social media trend, a feminine man sitting in a corner consumed with his laptop screen, and a mother managing 3 young children. A deranged person enters the shop either under the influence of a controlled substance or with a clear intention to commit a robbery. The teenagers and man don't even notice the deranged man entering, and the mother steps between her children and the man. While the fact these scenarios might be frowned on for even being brought up in our present culture, if we take an honest assessment of the situation, what scenario is the world we not only hope to live in, but honestly, feel safer in? Looking back at the turn the other cheek verse of Matthew 5 and Luke 6, read in its full context, we see Jesus is addressing the vengeful spirit, seeking revenge, being driven by emotion and anger. These are not good, and not at all what this chapter is advocating for or discussing. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." Luke 22:52-53. In Luke 22, we find the scene in which Jesus is arrested by the Pharisees. Moments before he directed his disciples to put away their swords, for this moment was already planned in the perfect will of God. That said, there are a couple points of interest. While the disciples were told to put their swords away, they were carrying swords, indicating they believed there could be a moment in which their use was appropriate. The second point is to notice how Jesus addresses the Pharisees. Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? It is not wrong, inappropriate, or insensitive to say a good, honorable man, capable of violence, but far more capable of controlling it, makes our world a better place. The world, utilizing the mistakes of a few men, has demonized all men. A fraudulent message has been pushed that a man capable of protecting his family and society is toxic. Here's the very uncomfortable truth. Violent men have existed since Cain and Abel. These men have existed within every culture for all of human history and have proven they are willing to prey on the innocent and defenseless. God has designed men to be protectors, and our men that train for violent encounters are willing to risk their own safety for the sake of another and do not seek violence, but are prepared to use it, should be celebrated, not demonized. Apples and oranges. Let's be abundantly clear. A man willing to use violence against women, children, and those who cannot protect themselves are cowards. Men who use violence for vengeance to get their way or in anger are cowards. This is not the type of violence being discussed in this chapter. In fact, this is the exact type of violence we should be preventing. Comparing an angry man willing to use violence against women and children, willing to use violence because he's angry, willing to use his violence to impose his will on weaker people, to a man capable and willing to protect those who cannot protect themselves, is like comparing apples to oranges. There is no excuse for violent words or actions against women, children, or weaker men in response to our own anger or lack of self-control. Violence should only be hesitantly used to protect those who cannot protect themselves against the evils of this world. Period. Of course, this brings the next question. How does a man live in a way they are capable of violence, but far more capable of controlling it? Number 1, get in the Word of God. It is sharper than any double-edged sword. We must be in God's Word every single day. We must have a mindset of compassion, courage, and self-control. A vengeful spirit, an angry spirit, a prideful spirit, these have no place in our homes, churches, or society. We must ensure we are not led by our emotions. We must ensure we do not desire or seek violence. God's Word will mold and shape our hearts in a tangible way. We have no problem scrolling social media or watching the news. Instead of filling our minds with toxic algorithms, let us fill our minds with that which is good, right, and true. Number 2, take care of our mind and bodies. We live in a society that desires a pill or a quick fix for a lifestyle of consistently poor choices. We want to believe we can eat poorly, not train or work out, pop a pill, and still be ready to defend our families or the innocent when needed. This is simply not the case. Under duress, the mind and body do crazy things. Believing our mind and body will respond well in a critical incident when we've done nothing but feed it garbage is a woeful strategy. As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words. If you desire to be a sheepdog protecting the flock, you must prepare for it. Eat right, work out, train. We will discuss this in detail in a later chapter. Claiming to be a pacifist because you do not take the time and energy to train is not virtuous. It's cowardly. Just because we train and are capable does not mean we will use the skills or abilities. Number 3, pay attention. While this notion seems overly simplistic, let me assure you it is the single greatest technique we can master. Situational awareness is a lost and dying art in a generation consumed by the electronic devices in our hands and the assumption nothing bad will ever happen to us. It is not to say we must move through life in a state of mental stress, assuming every moment is going to be the next act of attack. In fact, should be quite the opposite. Most people seeking to do harm, whether by robbery, assault, or even active shooters, are looking for soft targets and easy victims. Men paying attention, capable of violence, and willing to defend the defenseless makes our society a better place. The only defense against evil, violent people is good people who are more skilled at violence. Rory Miller. Evil, violent men will always exist. If we want to be where the buck stops, we must ensure we are prepared to defend those who cannot defend themselves.